Thanks. Like, hey, Scoob, did you hear Nikki Blake is hosting a Scooby-Doo panel? No. Yeah. Like on today's Scooby-Doo episode, Scooby-Doo and Shaggy meet Nikki Blake. Yeah, and a Scooby Panel. Like, we need to get this puppy started. Okay, Nikki Blake, take it away, Scooby-Doo.
Welcome to the Scooby Panel. I'm your host, Nikki Blake from ScoobyAddicts.com, and today we'll be talking about animation with Bob Nesler. Before we begin, I would like to have you all introduce yourselves. So Bob, let's start with you.
My name's Bob Nesler. I'm a retired animator. I made cartoons for about 40 years.
Will?
Yeah, I am Will Davenport. I am an artist, and you can find my work at Davenport Will Draw on all major social media platforms.
Wendy?
Hi guys, I'm Wendy. I'm a commissioned artist, an occasional blogger, and a 30-plus year Scooby-Doo collector.
And Cameron?
Hey guys, I'm Cameron with Scooby-Doo and Cameron Too. I'm a big-time Scooby-Doo collector, a long-time Scooby-Doo fan, and I'm one of the co-hosts here at Scooby Panels. So thank you for having me.
Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. This is going to be awesome. Bob and I talked for 2 hours the other day, so he has some amazing stories for us.
And Nikki helped my wife and I chase a bear down the street.
And that video is available on his Instagram page, so definitely check that out.
It's so shaky because I was running and panting and puffing, to keep up with the bear. But we have a lot of bears in Sierra Madre.
So our first question for you is, how did you get started in the animation business?
I started when I was really, really young. The way I started was I liked drawing a lot. And so when I was about 12, I took a big box full of drawings I was living in Modesto at the time. And my mother had been a dispatcher for the forestry up in Tuolumne County. So I grew up with Miwok Indian kids, on a little town, Tuolumne City, which is right on the reservation. So I kind of grew up out in the woods, but then my mother remarried, and my stepfather lived in Modesto, so we moved to Modesto. And I just loved drawing, so I went into the Modesto Bee, to the art department, with a big box of drawings to see if they liked my drawing, and I got a lot of attention. The guy who was the head of the art department there, Steve Odell, was an amateur aficionado of animation. And so he helped make my first animation disc and table, which I still have, by the way. All made out of wood, and helped me get my first camera and all that stuff so that I could make animation. And so I was just learning to draw and make animated cartoons, and I kind of learned the basic principles, using the light board and everything, from him. And before I even turned 18, I got my draft notice, that I'd been drafted into the U.S. Army. And on my 18th birthday, I was in the induction center. And the thing that saved me from going to Vietnam, I was at Fort Ord, and I went through basic training and advanced infantry training, and then had orders for Vietnam. But they decided they wanted me, because I could draw cartoons. I had illustrated the day room wall in our company area. And the brigade commander, which is kind of a funny story, because I got court-martialed a couple times for being goofy. And I was in the stockade at the time when the brigade commander comes by and to inspect the company, right? The infantry company. And all of us had gotten our orders for Vietnam. And he came out of the day room as part of his inspection, and he said, who did those cartoons on the day room wall? I had done the, do you remember the Mickey Mouse Club, the old one where they would sing, who's the leader of the club that's made for you and me? Yeah. And I put them all in Army uniforms. And my CO, Captain Hammond, who's a helicopter pilot, you know, with Hal Moore, and he said, Nessler, are you saying the Army is Mickey Mouse? He was very deeply offended that I'd chosen that motif. But so what had happened was I had taken that opportunity to take a portrait of President Nixon out of the frame, and I made him look like Adolf Hitler, and then I put it back in the frame, which was a court-martial offense. So they threw me in the stockade for about 2 weeks. And during that during that time that I was in the stockade, the brigade commander came through to do the company inspection, saw the cartoons and said, we need a cartoonist up at the Panorama newspaper, which was part of his command at Fort Ord. And who did those cartoons? And I heard the story from everybody in the company, and Captain Hammond got real nervous, and he said, oh, well, sir, that was Private Nessler did those cartoons. And he said, oh, well, and he looks over the company and says, Private Nessler, come here, you know, and nobody stepped forward because I was in the stockade. And, but some of the guys started kind of laughing a little bit, apparently. And Captain Hammond said, well, sir, Private Nessler's in the stockade right now. And he said, well, you get him out of the stockade and send him up to the brigade headquarters. I want to talk to him. And so Captain Hammond came to the stockade and visited me behind bars. And he said, how'd they treat you, Nessler? I said, well, sir, it's maximum security here in the stockade. And he said, how would you like to get out of there and go and work on the newspaper? You know, you won't have to go to Vietnam. And I said, well, hey, I'm all for that. So I went up and worked on the newspaper, and I had a comic strip called The Crusaders, which totally anti-military, where the characters were like Private Parts and General Mayhem and but characters like that. And Major Disaster was one of them, and called The Crusaders. And it was like the Crusades, but it was all about the Vietnam War and how stupid it was. And and I did a lot of stories on training, right? So I had to do stories on training. And that got me out of Vietnam. I remember one time I was doing a story on forward observers for artillery down at Hunter Liggett, which was south of Fort Ord. And where I did stories of the guys operating the 105 howitzers, and then I went up on top of the mountain where the rounds would go over, and the forward observer would see where the rounds were hitting and then radio back to give them more accurate, you know, tell them how to adjust to hit the targets. And on the way back, Sergeant Hypes was my driver. By then I was an E5 and he was an E7. So he actually, my driver outranked me, but we were in combat gear from this, doing this story about the artillery, right? And we were in a Jeep, an open Jeep with the stars on it, you know, an army Jeep. And we're driving up along Highway 1 and we see this little hippie girl sitting by the road on her sleeping bag, and she's obviously crying, you know, and she's got the headbands and the tasseled leather thing. And she was little, probably 14, 15, something like that. And so we stop and we count, hey, honey, what's going on? You okay? So, oh, I'm homesick. I want to go home to my mama, you know? So, oh, okay. Hop in the back of the Jeep and we'll take you and you can call your mom. So we go back to Fort Ord and we take her into Captain Hammond's headquarters office. And we say, well, well, sir, we found her on the side of the road. We promised to reunite her with her mother. And so Hammond got on the phone and called her mother. And he said, you guys go back to the holdover barracks and see if you can raise some money to pay for the bus fare and stuff, you know. So we did. And we fed her. It took her up to and so she got an Army lunch. And got her on the bus, sent her back to her mother. We never talked to her after, but Hammond said that he got a call from her mother when she arrived and everything was safe, good. So I don't have a lot of Army stories, but that's one. It's not like combat or anything. Yeah.
So going back to animation, how did you get started working on Scooby-Doo? I believe Richie Rich was the first series you started working on. Richie Rich Scooby-Doo Hour.
It could have been. I can't remember. I'll tell you how I went to work for Hanna-Barbera, though. I had just come back from South America. I'd been in South America for about 5 years. And I'd made a lot of TV commercials there. So I had a reel of TV commercials I'd made. And some of them had animation in them that I'd done. I'd made my own animation stand down there and put a crew together and everything. Because it was sort of like being a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court down there, you know, in Bogota. It was sort of primitive. You had to make your own stuff pretty much. So I went into Jay Sarbury, who was the head of animation at Hanna-Barbera, and asked for a job. And he said, nope, can't hire you. There's old-time animators out of work, so forget it. So what I did was I went immediately downstairs and asked Ginger, who's the secretary in front of Bill Hanna's office there, secretary for both Bill and Joe. And I asked her, and she said, Mr. Hanna, there's a young man here who wants to see you. And he said, well, send him on in. And so I went in and I showed him the reel. It was on videotape of some of my TV commercials. And he hired me on the spot as a full journeyman animator. He said, yeah, that's good. We can use you. We have a lot of shows to do. So then he called Jay, said, Jay, come down here. I want you to meet this new animator. Jay, the guy who just told me there was no work for me. So, and he was a crusty old guy, you know. And so Jay comes down and just shooting daggers at me the whole time. And then he takes me back to his office and he said, I told you there was no work, so you went around me to the old man and got a job, huh? And then he said, listen, he said, one retake from you and I'm firing you. And he said, so you're not going to last more than a couple of days. Well, Joanna Ramersa was walking by. She was an animator there. She's still a close friend. She's like, gosh, she's in her 90s now. And she was tall and beautiful. She had been a model, you know. In fact, her daughter, I think, still is a model. But anyhow, and so she was just a lovely gal and a wonderful animator, one of the top level animators. And Jay was very enamored, like all the guys were, of Joanna. And so she heard Jay screaming at me. And when I came out of the office, she put her arm around my shoulder and said, listen, Bob, she said, make sure that everything you do goes by me first. I'll check everything and make sure that nothing has retakes. So for 2 years, Joanna did that for me and I had no retakes. And then after that time, because, you know, Bill was sending me overseas and things like that to, you know, fix things and all kinds of stuff. So then Jay just adopted me like his own son, called me one of his boys, and then everything was good. So Jay's long gone now too. Most of them are, yeah. But I don't think we realized just how great we had it back then, you know. Yeah.
And how did your experiences working in the business compare between when Scooby was owned by Hanna-Barbera and when Warner Brothers took over in 1996?
Well, let's see here. There's just so many. I mean, you're talking about 40 years or so, you know. The guy who created Scooby-Doo was Iwo Takamoto. And Iwo was the creative head of Hanna-Barbera. And he created Scooby. And when I don't remember what the first Scooby I worked on was. It wasn't the 13 Ghosts. There were other Scoobies. And I was animating. So I got these model sheets and I said, holy cow. And I tried and I went into Iwo and I said, Iwo, I'm having a lot of trouble drawing Scooby's hind legs. Just making him move, making him walk around so the legs look good. So Iwo showed me how to animate Scooby's hind legs and how to, so that's how I learned to draw Scooby from Iwo. That was the big thing, was the hind legs, because they're weird. If you actually look at Scooby's hind legs, they're strange. And Iwo did the famous model sheets, you know, the ones you see over and over and over. Those are Iwo's actual drawings. And he cheated. Like when Scooby's sitting or something, you know, the legs have a different construction. And so he would teach me how to cheat the legs so that it looked okay, you know. So I've drawn a lot of Scoobies. And then the last thing we did was I worked on the first couple episodes of Scooby-Doo Guess Who with Mike Lyman. Mike Lyman and I did those, which animation directing or timing or whatever the heck they call it these days. And so Chris Bailey called us in and wanted us to work on it. But Mike and I kind of have our own ideas of how to do stuff because, well, Mike passed away. As a matter of fact, he passed away working as a timing supervisor on Scooby-Doo Guess Who. Mike was one of my best friends. And so he and I, knew how to do the job and we did it, but Chris was kind of new there and he didn't like our independent way. And so after we'd done a couple episodes, I think 3 episodes, he fired us. And yeah, but the show was in big trouble. Okay, Chris is okay, but he kind of got the show behind schedule and over budget right off the bat. And so management at Warner's called in Leanne Moreau to be the executive producer, or that is to say Chris's boss. And the first thing she did was tell him to hire Mike and me. You got to get those 2 guys back in there because they know how to make the show, you know. So he did. At first he wasn't too happy about it, but then everything started getting back on track. So then he got real happy about it. So I've been fired. I like to say I've been fired by the best. You know, it's almost everywhere I go, I get in trouble, I guess. In the Army, I did. Mind you, that court-martial was just the first of 3 court-martials. The one I told you about. I got court-martialed by Hal Moore himself, the famous guy that movie We Were Soldiers with what's his name? Oh, that famous Australian guy played Hal Moore. Anyhow, he's a big hero. He fought the first big battle of the Vietnam War, the La Drang Valley, when I think he was a light colonel at the time. And organized the 7th Air Cavalry, which my CO, Captain Hammond, was a helicopter pilot. And Hal Moore, when I was working on newspaper, I would wear yellow happy buttons instead of my US pins, you know, the brass pins you wear in your Class A's, right? Class A's are like a business suit. And so I was working at the newspaper. I had security clearance. They gave me, they promoted me, and because of the security clearance and everything, I didn't have to carry a gun, and I was really happy. I didn't have to go to Vietnam, right? But I had to walk past the general's office every day on the way to work. And he must use binoculars or something because his office was set back. He comes running out, halt, soldier, halt. He's got his helmet liner with 2 stars on it. And he's got a gun in a holster, and his boots are blouse. He's wearing combat fatigues. And I thought, holy cow, some soldier's in a lot of trouble. He's got the general angry at him, you know, and it was me. He was mad because he saw the happy buttons, you know, which are illegal. I'd taken the brass US buttons off, right? I put yellow happy buttons there. So from a distance, nobody would notice, and nobody cared up at the newspaper. I mean, nobody saluted or anything at the newspaper. Nobody cared. But he cared because he was like Mr. Yeah, he looked at me and he said, "You're the SOB that does that comic strip." And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "You know something, Nessler? You're what's wrong with this man's army." He said that I was what's wrong. So he made me stand there at attention until the MPs came and put shackles on me and took me off to the stockade again. So that was the second time I got court-martialed. But that's another story, I guess. So Scooby, I don't remember what the first Scooby was. We're doing a lot of shows. We're doing the Flintstones with the Schmoos. I think Barney and Fred were cops. And I was doing a lot of storyboards at the time too. And, but I can't remember what the first Scooby was we did. I just knew that when we did the 13 Ghosts, I couldn't believe. Mitch was the producer. Mitch is an old friend, still to this day, an old friend. Tom Ruger too. Tom's over at Disney now. I couldn't believe that I was going to get to meet Vincent Price. That was so cool. And I did, because he came in to do the recording sessions, you know, so I did get to meet him. Just a lovely man, very soft-spoken, gentle, very tall, very tall. And it was pretty cool to actually get to, in a, you know, a casual thing, you know, not like a fan or something, you know, it's like we were working with him. So that was pretty neat.
How did he become involved with the show? Was that part of the original concept, or was he available and interested? Like who pitched that?
Oh, that was Mitch and Tom Ruger. That was, in fact, I think Mitch pretty much created the show. Mitch Schauer, he was a big Scooby fan all along, and a really brilliant artist. Mitch was one of the few guys who would just sit down. He could sit down with a pen and draw a perfect drawing with no construction lines or anything. It just flowed out of him, just like magic, you know. He's probably one of the best draftsmen I ever knew. And then he worked on Garfield and stuff when I was over there doing Garfield at Film Roman. And, you know, in fact, Mitch created another show called Bobby's World.
I remember that show.
With Howie Mandel.
Howie Mandel.
Yeah. And I'm trying to remember who else worked on the 13 Ghosts. I know there were 2 ghosts who were like comedy ghosts. They were like goofy ghosts. And one of them, I can't remember which, was Howie Morris. And Howie Morris, the voiceover actor, he's a comedian. He was in a lot of the Mel Brooks movies, you know, Howie. And he became a very good friend. And we hired him to do the Wade the Duck character on U.S. Acres. So he was the voice of Wade. And I think that's when I first met Howie at recording sessions when we were doing the 13 Ghosts. I can't remember the name of the ghost that he did. It was a character that was in every episode. Yeah.
It was either Weird or Bogle, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Long time ago.
Yeah.
I know we had Scrappy in that, but for some reason people didn't like Scrappy very much. You know, I don't know who didn't. I thought he was okay. I thought he was a fun character. You know, So he kind of got dropped from the crew. That was a funny thing. I'm not really sure. It runs in my mind that some of the other regular characters might not have been in there too. Just did 13 episodes. Then later, they did a second season that I didn't work on, but I understand that Vincent Price wasn't the voice of Vincent Price there either. What was his name? Vincent Van Gool or something like that.
Mhm.
But I guess Vincent Price wasn't available either for that one. And I don't know what happened there, but he definitely did all the episodes of. Is it possible that we only did 12 episodes of the first season? I think we only did 12. I think that the very last episode we didn't get around to for some reason.
Yeah, that's part of the whole in the fan community, because I don't think you ended up catching the 13th ghost, and the series was called 13 Ghosts. So
Exactly.
they released that direct to video movie
Oh,
just last year or 2 years ago.
oh.
It picked up on that. Were you familiar with that movie?
See, I'd have to ask you if I worked on it, because I don't know. I'd have to.
I don't think that was one that you were listed on as working on. Curse of the
Okay.
13th Ghost.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I don't remember it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that doesn't mean anything. Yeah. So, but they had to. It was like a Pandora's box thing, where they accidentally released these evil ghosts, and so each episode they had to catch one. You know, that's about all I remember.
So, talking about 13 Ghosts, you were credited as a story director, which seems like a different role for you. Why were you focused on writing for that series as opposed to the animation, and did you enjoy it?
You know, I don't think I did any writing per se on that. What I was doing was I was making sure that when we did storyboards, that the storyboards, well, see, here's the thing. The process is you have a script, okay? And a writer writes the script, and very few of the writers were animators or cartoonists. So they would write something that maybe wouldn't translate very well. So it helps if you have someone who interfaces to make sure that those things work. So like Mitch did a bunch of storyboards. Tom didn't. Tom's a writer, but I did a bunch of storyboards. And basically my job was to make sure that every board was producible, you know, and that it reflected what the script called for. So I wasn't really writing on that show. I was just making sure that we stuck to the scripts, which the networks approved. You see, the networks approved the script. And whether it works or not, the network has approved it. So you have to stay as close to it as possible. So, but needless to say, a lot of stuff doesn't work, you know, and so you have to move things around and fix them so they do work. And sometimes a thing that looks like it's going to be funny on a script isn't really that funny when it's in pictures, and trying to, so you have to add, you know, you have to spice it up, make it work. So there's a bunch of stuff involved. That was during the same period though that I was writing Smurfs. So I definitely wanted to learn to be a writer at that time. And I wrote a lot of episodes that got made, but you know, like I say, it just took such a toll on my poor limited mental capacities that I was walking into walls and things. Yeah.
So
Writing
I would
hard.
assume that you enjoy animating more than writing.
Yeah, I always liked animation. I liked it a lot, and I learned from some of the best. When I was in college, I used to go over to Disney. I knew Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnson really well. I also knew Ward Kimball really well, and his son John is a friend to this day. And Ollie would let me sit. They were working on a movie called Robin Hood at the time. And Ollie would let me sit and watch how he was keying the characters. That they would divide characters to animators, right? The animator, they would cast characters to different animators. And both Frank and Ollie and Ward, of course, were some of those famous 9 old men, you know. Of course, they're all gone now, I think. I don't know if any of them survived. But those were the 3 I knew really well. And so I learned a lot about animation. Tex Avery was working at Cascade down the street. And he became my first real mentor. This before he started with Friz Freeling. And there's a company called DePatty Freeling, you know, which was Friz. Friz was another guy I worked with a lot, Friz Freeling. He's a very famous director for Warner Brothers. So I learned animation from guys like that before I even started Hanna-Barbera, I guess. But it's all mixed up, you know, it's hard for me to figure the chronology. Does anybody know when the movie The Point was released? Murakami Wolf Swenson. Murakami Wolf Swenson and Fred Wolf, who created the Ninja Turtles, was there. And that's why I started working on Ninja Turtles from the get-go at the very beginning, because Fred came to me and said, would you help us with this? So Fred, and so that company did The Point, and I worked a little bit on the very end of it. I don't think I got a credit on it, but we did those Baby Bean Sprout TV commercials, did a lot of those, you know, for Jolly Green Giant, Baby Bean Sprout commercials. And during that time, I was still in college, actually. And so I met Tex Avery, and I was a big fan of his, and he helped me build my first animation stand and helped my little crew at the college learn how to animate, set up everything properly. And Tex was great. And Tex Avery is a very famous animator, you know. He just had one eye. He had one eye shot out with a paper clip when he was at MGM. Or was it Disney? He would never say who it was. They were shooting each other with rubber bands and no, I think it was thumbtacks, actually. It wasn't it was just thumbtacks.
Wow.
Yeah, and he got one in his eye and it blinded him. And so he was a one-eyed animator. Tex Avery, the famous Tex Avery was, yeah. And he was my first major mentor to teach me how to animate. So I learned from some of the very best. He was the one who taught me about framing the action. That if you have a very low energy pace, you know, very, very mild pacing, and then you go up into a big broad reaction like the famous Tex Avery takes, right? That goes outside of that frame of reference you've set, then it looks a lot broader than it would if everything was broad, you know. So that kind of contrast, counterpoint in pacing, right? Timing, it's animation timing, how that works. You know, it's like acting, you know, it's the same thing, the register, you know. And I always remembered what Tex had taught me about that when I was doing like voiceover direction, you know, with actors, and how, you know, how important that you know, having complete control of the register that of their performance. Yeah.
Wendy, Cameron, or Will, do you guys have any other questions before we move on to the other stuff? I know there's a bunch of 13 Ghost questions, Will, that you still have. If you want to ask them, that's fine.
I have so many questions, and I won't jump into all those because I know you've got them all in order. But if you don't mind, I did have one question. You know, it was amazing to me. So first off, it's great listening to the stories that you have in that sort of firsthand perspective.
I'm sorry, I'm an old guy.
It's awesome. I love it. But it was amazing to me that, you were talking about, the very beginnings at Hanna-Barbera, and then you were just working on Guess Who, which is amazing. And that's the series that's out right now, right? And I was curious to hear a little bit about the difference in animation between, those early days at Hanna-Barbera and what your experience is at Guess Who. And I'm interested to hear whether it's actually more similar today than it is different, because animation is a high volume of images, right? And you have to storyboard, and there's a lot of fundamental things that are consistent. Or is making a cartoon these days with the technology that's available, is it actually a really different process than it was back in the day?
Well, that's the word, is process. I was lucky because I got to learn from the great ones. I mean, I even knew Grim Natwick and Bernie Wolf. Bernie worked for me on Garfield. They were the ones who created Betty Boop when they with Max Fleischer back east. And so I had an opportunity to learn from the pioneers, I mean, not all the way back to Winsor McKay, but pretty close, and June Foray, who is one of the most famous voice actors in the history of our business, was a very close friend. And she passed away. She was 99 years old when she died a couple of years ago. So I really was lucky to be able to learn. And my main mentor, which began when I started working on Garfield, the guy who I learned the most from was Phil Roman, and we traveled. I mean, it's like my dad, I don't see him much anymore. I mean, I've seen him a few times, and it's just like a family reunion when I do. I mean, he's a very, very fine man. And a great animator. Gosh, he knew. Of course, he was one of the directors over at Warner Brothers, and he was one of the directors on the Peanuts specials, Bill Melendez, which is how he ended up inheriting Garfield, which is an interesting story, but not what we're here talking about. What was the question again?
I was interested in how the process was different in your most recent work on.
Right. Well,
how did technology change things?
It used to be that animation studios were run by cartoonists, and there wasn't so much money in it. So it didn't attract the big shots. So the people who ran the studios, well, Bill and Joe, for example, at Hanna-Barbera, Bill Hanna, Joe Barbera, they started at MGM and they created Tom and Jerry. That's what Bill and Joe were doing there. They were doing shorts, theatrical shorts. I mean, they knew everything about the process, They really understood it. I mean, I have so many stories about Bill and Joe, you can't believe. And the last thing I worked with Joe on, just shortly before he passed away, was the Tom and Jerry movie that we did with Phil. It was for Turner. And I got to work with Henry Mancini because he did the music. That was the last movie that Henry Mancini did. So I have stories about that too, Mancini was really cool. I know it's not answering your question, but I was just remembering that he invited our crew to Henry Mancini night at the Hollywood Bowl. And we got the boxes up in the front so we could all bring picnics, And we didn't know he was going to do this, but he came out on stage and they had the Hollywood Orchestra there and they played the Pink Panther music when he came out on stage. And so first thing he did was he started telling the audience at the Hollywood Bowl about the movie we were making, and had us all stand up and introduced us to the audience, and which was pretty cool, Every now and then we talk about that. Ron Myrick is my best friend, and he was part of the crew. And, he loves the Hollywood Bowl. That's his home away from home. So we talk about that evening every now and then, how bizarre it was for Henry Mancini to be like up on stage introducing us to the whole audience. It's pretty cool. We thought we were just going to be there and eat our picnics and watch the show, Didn't think we'd be part of it. So anyhow, the difference is that that like Phil Roman owned the company, and he was an entertainment guy. He was an animator. Used to be that the people who ran the companies, like Walt Disney, were animators, and the animation unit at Warner Brothers that did all those great Looney Tunes and stuff, with Chuck and Frizz. By the way, I don't know if you guys know this, but Frizz was the model for Yosemite Sam.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
He had a redhead, and he had a big handlebar mustache and a terrible temper. He would just scream and he was a terrible guy when he was young. Warner Brothers. So Chuck Jones created, and I know because I've had lunch a lot with both of them, because they were both very close friends with Phil, and we'd go to the smokehouse. I get invited along so I could sit and hear the stories. And yeah, so Chuck created Yosemite Sam as a joke, about Frizz Freeling. Yeah. Yeah. So I did a thing on this Looney Tunes thing. We did a couple of years called Wabbit. Did you ever see a series, Wabbit? So Sam Registers, a friend, he runs the place. He asked me to do the first episode called Buddha Bugs. And believe it or not, Sam has his guns in that one. Then I guess they took his guns away immediately after that, but on that one episode I did, he had his guns. Yeah. I did, I think, about 7 episodes, but I don't remember a lot, but I was impressed with that first one where Sam had his guns back. So the difference is that management today, it has involved itself in deciding what shows will be made and how they'll be made. And the truth is that management people are, these days, very few of them come out of production now. Almost all of them are attorneys or business majors. We call them bean counters. And they make really, really, really bad decisions. These are the people who want to do remakes of everything, right? They say, oh, well, that did really well 20 years ago. Let's make a new version of it, and make it up to date, right? And this is how, and so, you get a thing like, I understand, I haven't seen the new Space Jam, but both Spike and Tony are very, very good friends of mine, and they were the directors on Space Jam. If the show was apparently a big bomb, did badly, and why, I don't know. They didn't use Michael Jordan in this one. Michael Jordan's kind of a funny guy just on his own. So, that may have been the reason. I don't know why it failed. The pup named Scooby-Doo CGI animation was really good, though. And Spike and Tony did that one. I think they had trouble getting their money back because they released it streaming during the middle of the pandemic. It was intended for theatrical release, but during the pandemic, they couldn't release it theatrically, and they didn't want to wait. Yeah. But I did see that one. I thought they did a great job. They asked me to work on it, but I was too busy on other shows, I was at Warner's, but I was doing DTVs and the Scooby-Doo series, for Chris. So I just didn't have time to do it. And I didn't want to drop the ball on those other projects,
Was it easier working for Hanna-Barbera as opposed to working for Warner Brothers?
working for Bill, I loved Bill. I mean, I loved that guy. But he was sort of like a Marine drill sergeant in some respects, you know. And there was always the funny side of it too. You know, Joe was easy. See, the way it worked was Bill was in charge of animation production, and Joe was the head of writing. Okay, so when you write something, like one time Joe called Tom Ruger and me in, and because Tom and I had been, I don't know, we're both writers. I don't know if we had co-written anything, but he said, I want to make a pilot for a movie where the Flintstones meet the Jetsons. He said, so I want you guys to come up with something. So obviously the way had to start with the Jetsons making a time machine, you know, so we did the first outline of that with some dialogue and stuff. But we didn't write the final version of that, the thing that came. Joe paid us for it, and that was, you know, he liked what we did, but we went off and did other things. And then years later, somebody else wrote, it was either a DTV or I don't know exactly what it was. I don't think I saw the final one, but that's what it was I think it was that they had like a building supervisor who fixed things, you know, like if the robot broke, he'd fix it. And so this guy makes a time machine and they accidentally go back and meet the Flintstones. Then I think they bring the Flintstones to Jetson World or something. I can't really remember. I remember that we had a lot of fun, you know, fantasizing about it. I even brought the subject up. I went over to Caltech because I was living in Pasadena. I knew Kip Thorne was the head of relativity at Caltech. And he was like a hippie. I mean, now he's a Nobel laureate. So I ran into him not long ago and he was very dignified now. But back then he just looked like a hippie with long hair and a big beard and torn. And he was the head of the relativity department at Caltech. And I knew Kip, you know, he's very approachable back then. And so I called him on the phone and I said, I got to make a time machine for this thing I'm doing for Joe. And I want it to be believable. So like, help me out here. He said, I'll tell you what, I got a couple of graduate students who'll help you. Come on over. So I went over with my notepad, right? And he had a couple of graduate students who were just happy as heck to help design a time machine. So we came up with this crazy time machine idea. And I know that's weird, isn't it? To go to the head of the relativity department at Caltech to get your cartoon time machine designed. So stuff like that, you know. So we did that. It was more fun in many ways back then because you're dealing with cartoonists and you're not dealing with bean counters running the thing. The problem with the bean counters, I'm not going to mention any names because I know them all very intimately. I will tell you this, that the top management guy at Warner's Animation and now who runs Cartoon Network too is a fellow named Sam Register. And Sam is a good friend and he's a good guy. And he loves cartoonists. I don't think he can draw, but he can tell a good joke. And you know, I was a Boy Scout leader for a long time, and I worked hard to get the animation merit badge for the Scouts. And part of that was going to an animation studio. So Sam always let me take my, you know, dozen or so Boy Scouts through Warner Brothers over at 34R, and there's the building where his office is. And Tamara would lead the tour, and Sam would always come out and do his little shtick for the kids, you know, hey, I'm the boss here, you know, I run everything, you know, and just a great guy, wonderful guy. I think it was Tim Walker, who was my boss. He's the supervising animator at Warner's for like 25 years, still a very good friend. And I believe it was Tim Walker who introduced me to Sam. But I've known most of the guys who run the animation division at Warner's through several dynasties. And they're all okay people. But Sam is a very good guy and very pro animation. So I'm hoping that he's going to, since he's running Cartoon Network now, as well as Warner's Animation, that we'll see a renaissance because of him, you know. However, Sam is unique in management. The worst of all is probably Disney. They're the one nobody wants to work for. It's just so typical of the way they do things. You know, we were doing, they bought Marvel, they took over Marvel and just destroyed it. And by destroy, we did 3 seasons of Guardians of the Galaxy, which I think is not a bad animated series. And it's funny, and, you know, it could have been better, but you know, I don't think we did a bad job. We turned in everything on time and everything was below budget, you know. But they shut the show down. They shut down all the animation. They shut down Disney Toons, and those people only had like 2 days warning or something, you know, before. I mean, and there were like 80 people just suddenly lost their jobs. Disney didn't care. They're just Disney management is sort of the archetype of cruelty in our business right now.
Golly.
Yeah. So, I mean, I hate to say that. And like I say, I'm not going to mention any names unless they're the good guys, you know. So Warner's has made a lot of mistakes due to bad management decisions. But with Sam running things, those problems don't last too long. You know, a series will run for a season or 2 and then get canceled because it's just not good. You know, people don't like it. I was heartbroken over what they've done to Harley Quinn as a character because, you know, I was working on it on the Batman series when we created her. And it was just sort of a bullpen thing, you know, Joker needs a girlfriend. And that was when Mark Hamill was doing Joker. And I know Mark pretty well. I've hired him on a lot of shows and stuff. That was the broadest character he's ever played. And I think he just did a brilliant job on the Joker. And he needed a girlfriend. So everybody's, oh, who's this girlfriend? And so that's where the idea of the psychologist or psychiatrist who was treating the Joker when he was in prison, right? She was trying to cure him. It worked just the other way. He cured her, and she decided he had a lot more fun in life than she did. And so she went from being this very staid and proper scientist to Harley Quinn, right? But Warner's got the wrong idea about Harley Quinn. You know, she wasn't supposed to be just dark and evil and nothing else. She was supposed to be comic relief, you know, and she's supposed to be funny. And I think obviously they misused her because they canceled this Harley Quinn thing, this monstrosity, in my opinion, because, you know, we created the character and we knew what she was supposed to be. And then, so when bean counters get a hold of something nice, they often destroy it.
Yeah. Bob, may I ask you a question?
Yeah.
If I don't forget my question, I've been so enjoying just listening to you talk.
Yeah, I'm totally senile. So.
Do you think, based on any of your time at Hanna-Barbera, so anything 90s or prior to that, based on what you see happening today, not necessarily in any particular place of animation, but a lot of the time on our panels, we will talk about how we wish, since Warner Brothers is doing Scooby now, we wish sometimes that the people in management would maybe listen to the fans when we have an opinion about something that they've done.
Yeah.
Now, when you were at Hanna-Barbera, would you say that if you were making a series, whether it was Scooby or something else, was there people there who were saying, like, let's listen to how the fans are reacting to what we're doing, and if they're not liking it, let's tweak it?
Well, the networks wouldn't let you get away with it. That was back in the days when there were just 3 networks. And that was something Bill and Joe always, they did a lot of events with fans so they could get feedback. They absolutely paid attention. Everybody did. Yeah, definitely more fan friendly, that's for sure.
Mhm.
And I've always been a hiding guy. I've never I have friends who like were the organizers, the owners of Comic-Con, you know, and they would always invite me. They'd say, "Oh, you have to come be on these panels. June Fourier's on this panel. So and so's on this panel. We want you to be on this panel." And I never did. I never wanted to be on a panel because it just seemed kind of weird, you know. I did one time when I was working for Roger Corman. My buddy Jim Wynorski had a Jim and Angus Grimm. Did you ever see a movie called oh gosh darn, what was the name of it? There's the little balls that would fly around and stick in people's heads. Angus was the bad guy.
Well, yeah, the horror movie. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Is it Phantasm?
Phantasm.
Okay. So what's interesting, remember I mentioned Gerard Baldwin as the Smurf producer? So his son, what was his son's name? David, was it? His son was the kid who was the star in that movie, Phantasm. Then later he went off and joined the Moonies up in Oregon and just totally vanished. I don't know what happened to him after that. But so he was the star in that movie, and Angus was the bad guy, real tall fella, you know, or whatever, but really a nice guy, really a sweetheart. So he was on that. So I went in to do a panel, okay, and we had this. It was a science fiction convention over at the Universal Sheraton, you know, right there by Universal Studio there, and I thought, okay, so what the heck, I'll go. So I go, and I'm like, kind of creeped out by all the people in costumes, you know, like grown-ups who are like dressing like Halloween, and they're like, okay, this weird. And so what happened was we had one of those meeting rooms, big meeting room, with a stage and a table up on the stage to talk to. And the title of the thing was making low budget horror films. Okay. Well, unfortunately for us, in the room next door to us was Elvira. Yeah. And everybody went to see Elvira. They didn't want to see 3 dumb guys up on stage, you know. In fact, I remember my friend Sarah Lilly came by. She's an actress, real pretty girl, you know, real super pretty. And I said, Sarah, we need a girl in our panel because everybody wants to go see Elvira. Well, that didn't make any difference. Everybody wanted to go see Elvira. So I thought, well, wait a minute here, because I saw all these people going by in like Star Trek costumes, right? So I went up to the chalkboard that we had making low budget horror films on, and I put special guest speaker William Shatner. And then I kind of made a blur, like somebody had accidentally erased the end of his name. And then we sat and we were looking, and then people started going in because they wanted to see William Shatner. And so Jim and Sarah and all of us were saying, okay, so who gets to be William Shatner? And then we realized that when these crazy fans, some of whom were armed, you know, they had like swords and ray guns and things. And we thought, well, that could be dangerous to go out and introduce yourself as William Shatner. So we didn't. We went to lunch. That was the end of that. That was my adventure at the science fiction convention. And And that's it. That's the only convention like it. So I never went to Comic-Con. And then they would invite me every year to be on some panel or other. And we did stuff. I mean, we'd put together presentations to show at Comic-Con, like when we did the Ultimate Spider-Man, we did a big presentation for Comic-Con. But I never went because I didn't want to go. So finally, Mark Evanier, who is a writer friend of mine, he and I have done a lot of projects together. So Mark calls me and he says, we just had our organizational meeting this year. This may be 4 or 5 years ago. We just had our organizational meeting for Comic-Con. And I interrupted him and I said, no, I can't come. I'm sorry. You know, like, and he said, no. He said, we took a vote and we voted unanimously to ban you from Comic-Con for life, forever. And I said, really? No, you're kidding. He said, no, it's the truth. I said, they all voted to ban me? Yes. All the owners of Comic-Con are offended by you, Bob. You refused to come all these years. And I said, well, so like if I show up, all the security guards will jump on me and beat me up? Or something? He said, yes. And I said, well, how many people have been banned from Comic-Con over all these 20 some years? And he said, just you. That's something, right? You know. Well, I guess I'll never get to go to Comic-Con now.
Oh, that's funny. That's really funny.
Sad. But they did. One year they invited my daughter and she went for like 2 or 3 days and she shared a hotel room with some other girls her own age when she was in high school, you know, and she had a great time. She came back with photos of all the weird people in the costumes and stuff. She had a wonderful time and they paid for everything for her. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I still wouldn't go.
Bob, I've got a question for you. I was just thinking about it. So you were talking about like Harley Quinn a second ago. You said like y'all made her a certain way and then someone else got a hold of her and made her into a different way.
Yeah, it started with the live action movies where they just started turning her into a monster. And yes, they took away her circus mallet.
Yeah.
They gave her a baseball bat.
Right
off the bat, I saw that and I thought, no, wait a minute. She's not wearing the Harley Quinn costume anymore, and they took away her circus mallet. This bodes bad.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So I know that like with Harley Quinn and other cartoons we've seen in the past, they changed him. Well, with Scooby-Doo, I felt like he for 52 years he's kind of stayed the same, which I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's wonderful.
It's wonderful.
Why do you think Scooby-Doo, they've kept Scooby-Doo the same? Because I mean, I'm just asking.
Well, it's because the argument always when you go into some very early developmental meeting, you know, if they have the good sense to ask people who have worked on it. They did one, I don't know if it was a complete season or not, but they did a season at Warner's where I wouldn't work on it because they changed the characters too much. Can't remember the name of that.
Was it Mystery Incorporated?
That sounds right. Mm-hmm. That sounds right.
It kind of took a darker tone, that series.
Yeah. And but it's the old thing of if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yes, sir.
You know, the audience sees those characters, institutional characters. And Scooby has evolved in the way he's drawn a little bit, but we always still use those Ewo model sheets that Ewo drew himself.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And the personality and the character, I mean, is just so delightful and everybody likes that. I mean, what's not to love about Scooby?
Agreed.
You know, so it's because of that, I think, that they've had the good sense not to screw with it. In fact, Chris's primary thing, Chris Bailey was the one who pitched and sold and ran the Scooby-Doo Guess Who. So he put a lot into it. And although we ran into a couple disagreements here and there, which is probably why he fired Mike and I that first season, But what they say about a bad penny, it always returns. So Chris had to put up with this for the second 2 seasons. Anyhow, his primary goal was to make Scooby-Doo look like the Scoobies of the 70s. And we brought back a lot of the characters, from the 70s, the early, from before I was working on Scooby.
Yes, sir.
And I think Chris did a really good job, and I think the show looks like it. I mean, there were a lot of things that I think were nonsense, like we ended up redoing a lot of stuff that I think was okay to begin with, but which is how come the show just consistently ran behind schedule and over budget, just redoing stuff ad infinitum. So that was where we'd run into disagreements, but I think Chris did a beautiful job on the show. And I think Scooby-Doo Guess Who I think it holds up pretty well. I think the animation looks good. I think the performance is good. The music is good. Everything about it is basically good. I mean, when you make a thing, you look at it and you see the flaws, but I think we did a good job on it.
Yes, sir. Thank you for answering my question. I do appreciate you.
They did change. I feel like they got rid of Scrappy,
Right.
And they put a little more emphasis on the other characters in the gang, like they developed Velma quite a bit, So some of the characters that were sort of thinly developed, like Fred, they've fleshed them out. They've given them more to do, more personality.
Yes, sir.
It's good. But yeah, if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Agreed.
Amen.
In 13 Ghosts, there were a few things that were distinct changes that they made. So can you talk about the decisions in making Shaggy's shirt red, adding Flim Flam, Daphne's outfit being different, the van, and the concept of the story arc?
Is Flim Flam the little boy?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. Little boy with dark hair, right?
Yeah.
No. I can't. I honestly, that's one of the things, I'd have to go to some fan site and look it up to find out why we did that. I have no idea. But I think Flim Flam just vanished after that. I don't recall him in anything after was he in the second season?
He was in the movie Curse of the 13th Ghost. But what's odd is they brought Flim Flam back, but they didn't bring Scrappy back for that.
I didn't see that.
Yeah.
I don't think I saw it. The thing is, you have to understand, I've said when in the past, I've said, oh no, I didn't work on that. I have never seen that. And it turned out I did work on it. And I just forgot. So, but I don't think I really worked on that one. I don't remember that. So they kept Flim Flam, but they dropped Scrappy.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Scrappy wasn't even in the second season, huh?
Was there a second? There was only one season, right?
No, there were 2 seasons. There was a second season where another guy that I didn't work on, where another guy did the Vincent Price character. Vincent Price didn't do the Vincent Price character, but I didn't work on it. I've just heard about that season. Yeah.
Do you know for sure that it was released? Did they maybe produce some of it, but that never went out?
That's possible. I don't know. I just heard about it and I wasn't working on it. So I only thought about things I was working on. Yeah.
I heard, I was doing some research about the Curse of the 13th Ghost because it's one of my favorite series. And I think I can speak for everybody on this panel. It's one of our top series.
Well, I did work on that series. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I know they said that like the last episode, it didn't air, to catch the 13th Ghost because it was like budget issues. And then that's when it kind of cued into a pup named Scooby-Doo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
But from why I say that is because I think there was only one season, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, okay. Well, you see, that's the thing. That's probably why this is the first interview I've done since I did the cultural program with the Soviet Union back in the 80s. I did those because I had to, but it's like Like I say, I can't even remember the shows I've worked on, so I get things all tangled. And
Well, you
no,
have
it's
done
very
quite a bit
interesting.
of work, so.
Yeah, you have. And it's very interesting because you're probably not wrong, but this is something that none of us would have had any idea of, that there was perhaps a second season that was meant to be produced that didn't have Vincent Price doing the voicing. And then
You know what
whatever
I'll
happened,
bet?
it just,
Did Vincent Price do the voice of Vincent Von Ghoul in the 13th one, the special, or did they hire another actor to do Vincent's voice for that?
Maurice LaMarche did his voice. I believe Vincent had passed away by then.
That's the
Yeah.
answer right there. That's it. It wasn't a series. It was just that extra thing, because I knew that they had to cast someone else to do Vincent's voice at some point, and I must have just assumed it was a second series.
Do you have
That-
any insight on Shaggy's red shirt? Because we've always wondered why his shirt was red instead of green.
His shirt was red in the 13 Ghosts.
In 13 Ghosts, yeah.
yeah.
Gosh.
And blue pants, right? Not even his regular like reddish brown pants. Like
Yeah,
he
yeah.
had it just a different color.
You know, I know this sounds terrible, but when you're making a thing like that, you often don't have time to really pay a lot of attention to what the ink and paint people are doing. So, it's likely that we made the thing and then went right on to another project and maybe never saw the final thing. I don't even know. I mean, I have the model sheets and everything in my computers, but I have the color coding and all that. I mean, I have all that stuff, but quite frankly, I don't pay a lot of attention to. But no, I have no idea why his shirt would be a different color.
Yeah.
It must have been an 80s thing, because in 13 Ghosts, he had a red shirt, then in Ghoul School and the Boo Brothers. And then after that, it just kind of went back to green shirts. So I don't know.
Oh,
why.
really?
Yes,
I'll
sir.
be darned.
Mm-hmm.
I just wonder if it was, I mean, it's even possible that somebody in ink and paint came forward and they said, these backgrounds are this color, like if the backgrounds have a lot of green in them or something, or if there's a palette for the backgrounds, then the one of the colorists might have come up to Mitch or Tom, probably Mitch, and said, his green shirt's just going to blend into the background. Oh, okay. Well, what do you want to do? Well, let's give him a red shirt. Okay, that'll stand out. Okay, that sounds good. And then it happens. I mean, that's the way it's always happened with me when I'm producing a show or something. One of the colorists will come up and they'll say, "This isn't going to work. Look, here's the background and here's the character. We need it to stand out." Oh, okay. Well, do what you think you need to, to make it look good. And so that's the way that kind of thing often happens. I mean, but I don't know that. I'm just saying, just off the top of my head. You'd have to ask Mitch. He could probably explain it.
Along the same lines, and maybe you might direct us to Mitch on this too, but around that period, there were a lot of Scooby-Doo stories where the supernatural elements became real.
Yeah.
They stopped playing masks of people. Do you have a sense as to why where that change came from?
My guess about that is, you're talking about audience reaction, and does the studio pay attention to that? And of course, the network really has to pay attention. That's why they have standards and practices. Standards and practices, S&P, is a bunch of lawyers that look over the scripts, look over the storyboards, and they say, you can do this or you can't do that. I mean, an example, one time when I was doing Garfield, Judy Price calls me and she says, "Bob, I was just going over this episode. It was a magic thing, magic. And the magician had, as a matter of fact, I believe I had storyboarded that one, even though I was producing the show. The magician's assistant was the design, the model. And she says, Standards and Practices doesn't like this character. We need to change. I said, what's the problem? She said, well, her boobs are too big. I said, her boobs are too big. Yeah, Bob, her boobs are too big. This show is for kids. Now, I knew that Judy had 2 daughters, okay? And I said, Judy, boobs are for kids. And she just started laughing so hard that she said, okay, the boobs stay.
Oh my God.
So I didn't have to revise the storyboard. The whole reason I was arguing.
Oh my Lord.
I didn't want, because it was, you change, you change one character. Here you have all the character models done, all the turnarounds, all this work done, and then you change one little thing and everything has to be redone. So I was basically trying to preserve the status quo. Judy is still a friend. I saw her at the memorial for a friend not long ago, and she came up behind me and gave me a big hug. I didn't know who it was hugging me. It was Judy. She'd been the head of the network for a long time, children's programming. So as far as models and changes and things go, that's, standards and practices. And you were asking about why the ghosts and things that were real, like in 13 Ghosts, they were all real supernatural characters. And in Scooby-Doo's before that, they had real characters. You may recall some of the scary, creepy characters they had. Some of them we tried to bring back in Scooby-Doo Guess Who, but we were still restricted by that. It had to be real people in disguise. Okay. And they always would say the same line, and I would have pulled it off too if it weren't for these kids, that line. Okay, so the reason I believe was standards and practices, because parents groups and things were complaining to the network about something that was bad for kids, because the old Looney Tunes and stuff, Daffy Duck could get his beak blown off and blown backward or something by a shotgun blast. And so they were worried that kids were going to want to see the same effect with their friends by shooting each other with shotguns or something. So standards and practices came out with a bunch of rules that we had to, if you're going to be a network approved producer, you had to know the rules, right? And like, for example, the characters weren't allowed to do anything dangerous that was repeatable, right? Like if it was something so wild that no kid could ever do it, then they'd let it go. But if it was something that was repeatable, then you couldn't do it. You couldn't do it. And that's what happened to all the old Looney Tunes stuff. And then of course it progressed. And this is why, with the, they're worried. I mean, they took Yosemite Sam's guns away and Elmer Fudd's shotgun and all this because they're worried that kids can duplicate it and shoot their siblings, which, can happen. Let's face it. So my guess is that was what happened to Scooby. I don't recall exactly, but the network at the time and H&B were very concerned about parents groups and complaints that would come into the network, and they took it very seriously. And I do recall having heard on a couple of occasions that there were things like that, But then on the other hand, you have shows. I freelanced every one of the episodes of Eon Flux that we did for MTV. And that was just bloody, gory stuff, So nobody seemed to complain about that. But we even did a Scooby. What was this thing for? It was weird. It was a weird thing we did that was a murder mystery where somebody actually got killed and was dripping blood and stuff.
Was it the Scooby Natural?
Could that be it?
With
Where
the Scooby-Doo and Supernatural crossover?
Yeah, they were all in a mansion, and it was the murder mystery thing where they come in, discover somebody's been murdered, and the blood dripping from
it's Scooby Natural.
Yeah. I wondered about that when we were making that one. I had to ask, well, this is strange. What about it as standards and practices, But we did that one, I remember. I can't remember when, it's several years ago.
That could have
Yeah.
been a little bit different with their standards and practices because it was made for Supernatural and not as part of Scooby-Doo.
Oh,
Mhm.
So that
yeah,
might be
that
why.
sounds right. That sounds right.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Somebody explained it at the time, but I can't remember. But that would be my guess, is that if it's like supernatural, real supernatural stuff like ghosts and goblins, and you have religious people who are going to say that that's, you know, demons or witches or something. I don't know. Seems harmless to me, but I guess you don't want to offend anybody. That's my guess, is that's what happened. But I don't know that.
And when you worked on 13 Ghosts, did you intend for there to be only 12 ghosts and leave the 13th one later, knowing that they would revisit the series? No.
No. I remember specifically that there was I didn't work on the final last one because I don't think we ever made it. I mean, somebody did, but I didn't, I don't think. And but that was supposed to be a climax where everything was wrapped up, you know, like who was Vincent Van Gogh and all this kind of stuff. It's like would have been so I didn't see the final one. So I don't know if they followed the same storyline that we created, but yeah, the end of the series was going to be a wrap up, you know, where everything comes together at the end and you understand why and what for. But I guess we never made it. So it just kind of was left hanging.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember any of those details as to how it was supposed to end?
No, we did. It was written and it was storyboarded and it was, but no, I don't. Maybe if I dig through some boxes, I might be able to find something. I've got boxes in the garage with that kind of stuff in it. But no, for the life of me, I can't remember much in the way. But once again, you know who would know is Mitch Schauer or Tom Ruger. Either of those guys could tell you. I don't know where Mitch is working now. Tom's still over at Disney. That's all I know. Yeah.
And I think this is the last question about 13 Ghosts, but did you enjoy the different style that the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo took for the franchise versus the classic style?
Were Fred and Daphne and Velma in the 13 Ghosts?
Only
Just
Daphne.
Daphne was, but not
Daphne
Fred
was.
and Velma.
Okay. So that's what you mean by that. No, I prefer the whole gang. I like the whole gang. Yeah. I wonder why they weren't in there. Do you know why?
No.
I saw something once about there was feedback that that Velma and Fred were boring. The kids didn't really care about them and that they just wanted to see Scooby. So I think speculation, but it seemed like they just tried to strip it down to the things the kids were responding to. And that's also why they threw Flim Flam in there. Maybe.
Yeah. See,
you know,
that makes sense. That makes sense. And yeah, Bill and Joe were very concerned with input from the network and from fans. And, you know, they really listened to what people said because we got feedback, you know. So that would make sense to me. Yeah. Yeah. It was a long time ago. It's amazing to me that those shows are still running. You know?
They're all on Boomerang on Demand and now HBO Max. So
That's neat. Well, Patty Miller and Andrew watch cartoons all the time. So they tell me, they say, oh, we saw this, you know, and you know, that's so funny. That's so funny. But, you know, I've spent the last 40 years making cartoons. That's just, and I mean hours that you couldn't believe. Like, and I was mentioning that if you go to IMDb, I asked the TV Academy one time about that membership TV Academy, and they said, and they looked into it because they have computer records of everything. And they said they have computer programs, you know, that compare. And they said, you've only got maximum IMDb only has about a third of your credits. And you should go in and edit them and add stuff, which I've never done. And I said, no, it'd be too much. I'm not going to, just too much work, you know, so I got lots of hours, pension hours, which is why I was able to retire. And, but for the whole 40 years, I was like never unemployed, and I was always working multiple jobs, you know, multiple jobs. Someone was asking the other day about, it was a Japanese friend of mine asking about the Little Nemo movie. And I told him what I knew. I said, well, I went to work on that over on Ventura Boulevard because Miyazaki was the director, and they'd hired Ray Bradbury to write the thing. And so we made a trailer to sell and to raise money, which was beautiful. It was just beautiful. It's all these they go flying, and the little boy character's in the bed, and then he's got this older friend who's flying what was some kind of airplane. And they go through waterfalls and a city that's underwater and flooded and all these things. Beautiful thing, just beautiful. And then the Japanese mafia bought TMS and cut the budget, fired Bradbury. And when they fired Bradbury, because he took too much money, Miyazaki quit. And when Miyazaki quit, we all quit, because we were only working on the show because Miyazaki was directing it. And so the final movie looked like a very low budget Hanna-Barbera movie, you know, in the end, not something you're very proud of. But the thing to raise the money that we'd done, that trailer, was really beautiful. If the whole movie had been done that way, it would have been a classic. So we did so many things back then. You know, some of them just failed. But it was unfortunate. The guy came through, we were working there, and the mafia boss, the Japanese godfather who had bought TMS, comes through wearing this really gaudy mustard colored jacket. And when he went to shake my hand, I noticed that his little finger was missing. Oh, gee, just like in the Japanese mafia movies, you know. I didn't say anything. He had a couple of big, burly, dangerous-looking people with him. I didn't say anything. But I guess it's bad news when the mafia takes over the animation company. Anyhow, that's what happened to the Little Nemo movie, to the best of my knowledge. So I was doing all this juggling, you know. I was working for H&B. I was working on Little Nemo. I was working, you know, all kinds of different projects, and working late at night, putting in. Sometimes I would work 48 hours with no sleep just to meet a deadline, you know, and it just raised heck with my health. So I don't watch a lot of cartoons anymore, you know. I just made so many of them. I just burned out on cartoons, you know. And if I watch cartoons, I can't really enjoy it for the story. The Miyazaki stuff, I still watch as many of those as I can. There's a couple I haven't seen I need to buy, but I just don't watch a lot of cartoons anymore. You know, I guess
going back to animation itself, how much time did it take to make a 20-minute cartoon, like say in the 80s versus now in the digital age?
Oh, I think it's about the same. The only difference is that material, instead of literally having a big, heavy package of pre-production material that you send to China or Taiwan or Korea, and then you get back big, heavy packages, you know, to shoot, to film, unless they film it there. Now it's all electronic. So you don't have any actual physical shipping. You don't have to physically carry a hard drive, you know, to and from China, for example, which I have had to do many times. You know, you literally have a hard drive and you carry it through customs. What's this? This is a hard drive for a cartoon show. Oh, okay. You know, and sometimes they'd impound it and sometimes they wouldn't. That's, but as far as digital artwork goes, I mean, drawing on a Cintiq is pretty much the same thing as drawing on a piece of paper. And, you know, you have to have the human being there. You wouldn't want to watch a cartoon that was made by computers. You know, human beings have to do the backgrounds. They have to animate the characters. They have to do everything that they had to do before. There's the digital revolution has helped in some ways, but in some ways it's really hurt because things that would normally look really good and be done properly, the bean counters, once again, they try to circumvent the artist. If they could fire every cartoonist and just have computers make the shows, they would. And to the degree that they think they can, they do. And I don't have to tell you, the question that I get more than any other question is what happened to the good cartoons? People ask me, what happened to all the good cartoons? And I mean, I can point out the Scooby-Doo Guess Who series. I can say, well, that's like the old cartoons because we really tried to do that. But we tried to do the old Looney Tunes stuff with Wabbit and then what's called the new Looney Tunes. And try as you might, the trimmed down production process, you know, just really gets you, you know, because you never can quite have time to do it right, or they'll put somebody in charge who doesn't know what they're doing at all. That's very common. And the thing about the process is that the process is, it was created by the Walt Disney and Bill and Joe, you know, Hanna-Barbera and Walt Disney, and a couple of other people contributed. And so you end up with this process that evolved that works really well for TV series in particular, because you have to do it quick and it overlaps. The production always overlaps. You know, you have people who do the scripts and you have people who do the pre-production, and it gets shipped overseas. But while they're working on it overseas, you're doing the following things. You know, so you have this continual overlapping process. And then when the stuff comes back, same thing with the post-production. And you have these very complex production schedules that work. Well, they work really well if you follow them. When we were doing Garfield, we had to turn out an hour a week. You know, when I first started producing Garfield, it was a half hour a week, 22-minute episode, right? And then the network asked me if we could do an hour. And well, basically what I told Judy was, I said, well, yeah, I can do an hour, but, you know, don't tell Phil I said so. You know, you have to talk to him. He's the boss. So I ended up having to do an hour show, and we could add some people, but it was, I determined that the best way to do it was to have two separate units, you know, so that we could actually do it properly. And so we did. I actually had we had two production managers, Colley and Lowly. It was Lowly who was at the memorial service. She had passed away, and that when I saw Judy Price the last time. But John Cawley was the production manager, and Loli Aries was production manager at the same time, because we had to do an hour a week. So we had essentially 2 separate crews. And so that, the problem is doing the full hour would have just been very complex if we didn't literally have 2 separate production schedules. We're able to make it work that way without changing too much, without changing the paradigm, so to speak.
Do you
So
feel that the more digital or the modern digital process provides a better quality product, or was the old way better?
in the old way, because we were using acetate for cells, you were limited to essentially 4 levels before it started getting all fuzzy and before you could actually see the density issue of, and even with just 1 level, the ink and paint people, to make the colors match, they had to have a separate color mixture for the gray level difference of just 1 cell level. Okay, so because if you have a body here and an arm here, and you don't compensate for the cell level difference, then it's going to be a different color because of the density.
That blows my mind. I've never heard that before. That's crazy.
It's absolutely true. And you'll see, it's funny with camera. I remember one time I got called down to editing over at the old building, Hanna-Barbera. The editing was down in the basement. And there was a stairway going down. And right there was the 4-gang moviola at the bottom of the stairs. And it was right close to Bill Hanna's office. And so the editor calls me down on the intercom. We had an intercom. Ginger got on, called me to go see him. So I went down. He said, "This is one of your shows here, and I want to show you the camera. Camera forgot Fred's head for like 4 frames. So Fred was walking, and the background was panning, and his head just popped off. He was talking, right? So the mouth was on the head, right? And so the camera guy was tired, and he forgot to put the head on there for like 4 frames. And so we're saying, oh, Jesus, this is a long scene. We have to reshoot this whole damn scene. Oh, no. So Bill Hanna is walking by at the top of the stairs, and hey, what you guys doing down there? Oh, we just, Fred's head popped off for 4 frames, Mr. Hanna. Let me take a look. So Bill Hanna comes down, the big boss, right? He comes down and he looks at the moviola, and the guy runs it, and he says, it'll go by so fast, the kids will never notice it. Just run it that way. So we did. And that's why, because of that, you'll see in not just Hanna-Barbera, but you see it in a lot of even Disney stuff. You'll see things that should be there that aren't, or things that are there that shouldn't be, quite often, because it's just camera. And you see more of that in the old way, because with the new digital, you can put 1,000 levels and you'll never see a one of them because it's not cells. You can have huge crowds of people, everybody on a separate level, and you'll never know the difference. And if you screw up in shooting, no big deal. You go back and erase that frame and shoot it over again. You don't have to worry about the whole piece of film having to be redone. So the digital thing is a huge advantage. You don't have that problem with the negative density of the cell levels, having to repaint things. And for the few difficulties of digital art, it's way compensated for by the advantages. You don't have the cost of huge shipments, physical shipments from here to China and then back. It's all just uplink and downlink. It's satellites, it's electronic, it's easy. So a lot of people don't know the whole process of animation. In fact, there are a lot of people in management who don't know the process. They just absolutely don't. Yet they're making decisions that sometimes result in catastrophe because they don't understand what's involved or who's involved, you know. And but that's not the fault of it being digital. I think the digital thing is a very good advantage if it's handled properly. You know. I don't like Flash though. I really don't like Flash. I suppose theoretically you could do a cartoon in Flash and be okay, but generally speaking, everything done in Flash. They had a thing at Nickelodeon where they were doing a lot of shows in Flash, and every single Flash show just looked horrible. You know? Yeah, I don't like Flash.
So we're gonna let Wendy, Cameron, and Will ask any questions that they have. So Wendy, let's start with you.
I paint in a traditional manner, and I definitely appreciate what digital has to offer, but I have to admit that I love the kind of work and the charm and the personality that went into traditional animation as opposed to the digital. And while I would never take anything away from digital artists who are just as amazing as any other type of artist, I am a little sad that traditional animation is becoming a lost art.
It is.
Because I look at how today we look at digital things and we think like, wow, it's so amazing because you can get levels of detail that you could never do in a traditional medium.
Yeah.
And yet I kind of feel that it makes the end result just feel a little more clinical for me. I don't find it as homey. I think that if we could somehow jigger time and we took the cartoons or animations from today done the way that we do them today, and we took them back in time and said, okay, let's see if these series done like this will stand the test of time, where we're still going to be watching them in 50 years, we're still going to be talking about them. I honestly, I don't think that it would fly like that. I think that animation, the way that it was back then, is part of what has made those cartoons last this long. I mean, I really do think that in another 50 years, we're still going to be talking about Hanna-Barbera and the amazing cartoons that came out of that studio for more than 50, 60 years.
And Warner too. And I mean, the old cartoons that I agree with you completely. I'm a traditional animator. I learned from the traditional school. I agree with you completely. And I've said that animation, the sad thing is that we only have a couple of native art forms in the United States. Of course, France claims both. We have blues and we have animation. Of course, France claims that they invented both blues and animation. So, but the point is that those are two native art forms in the United States, okay? And both of them have gone the way of marble sculpture. They've become completely obsolete. And guys like me, we're just dinosaurs. Although I do have to say that I've been getting a lot of job requests lately to go back and run shows from like LinkedIn and stuff for big studios, you know, places I've worked and some places I haven't actually. And the word going around is that the bean counters, the big studio management, are starting to realize that the audiences don't like the crap they've been making. So they're looking for old guys to come back and save them. But all the old guys I know, guys like me and Tim Walker, all the others, they don't want to go back and deal with that nonsense anymore. I mean, you know, after you've spent decades and decades of beating your head against a wall to, you know, pay the bills and also make something that looks halfway decent, you don't want to go back and do that anymore. So I'm hoping that guys like Sam Register, and there's a lot of young talent. I mean, there's talent like you can't believe. There are young people coming out of Cal Arts and stuff who can animate way better than I ever did. People who studied life drawing, who can draw so well. Some of it's very funny. Background painters. They're almost all digital background painters now. I don't know, but in all fairness, these background painters are so good, but so much is required of them. I mean, I know them. It seems that most of the background painters, I could be wrong about this, but there are some guys, most of them seem to be ladies though, the background painters who are doing the digital stuff, but they're required to crank out so much in such a short time. And what they do is so magnificent. You know, you look at what they do and you think, my God, I could never do that in a million years. I like to draw on paper too. I mean, I like to draw on paper. There's just something about drawing on paper that makes it better. You know, with digital, you put a line down that's not good, you erase it. It's no big deal. It goes away. It's like it was never there. You know, so there are some advantages, but I'm old school. I still do all my construction lines. When I draw a picture, I do it in blue. Even if I'm doing digital, I draw it in blue first, because that's my habit, you know, the animation blue, non-repro blue, you know, and then, so when the cleanup artist cleans up in black and they Xerox it, your construction drawing doesn't show, just the cleanup line. That's the reason we draw in blue. But, you know, old habits die hard. So whenever I draw in blue, you know. I think it's already a dead art, but it's conceivable to me that somebody like, I mean, if you guys are cartoon fans, I don't have to tell you how Cartoon Network stuff started looking really bad. And I know exactly why. And I won't mention any names, but I personally very closely know exactly why. And the guys the artists who were called in to make the shows and stuff had to do what they were told to do, you know. Yeah. But there are still some exceptions, like Adventure Time, I thought looked pretty good. I worked on a lot of those. But now Sam Register's running Cartoon Network as well as Warner Brothers Animation. And I just believe that Sam is going to make a huge difference. You know, I think there's so much young talent, and Sam can tell the difference. He knows the difference. He's able to use good judgment. So I'm hoping that his presence is going to make all the difference. You know, I mean, I'm hoping for a renaissance in animation.
Be great.
Yeah.
Wendy, do you have anything else that you want to ask?
No, I'll let Cam have a turn.
I'm sorry, I talked over you. I didn't mean to do that.
No, you finished what I was going to say, so it worked out perfectly. I was hoping that you would say that. I was really hoping to. So yeah, no, I love the traditional sense of things, and I appreciate the digital, but I wish that over the years, why can't we just do both? I don't like how when technology and things progress, everyone seems to think that means, well, we don't need the old anymore. And it's like, well, maybe you don't need it, but it still has a lot of value. So maybe we could just have both. And instead of just strictly moving away from traditional animation to 100% digital, which I think is what unfortunately will happen in the very near future.
Oh, they're trying to do that. Yeah.
They are. Yeah, absolutely. I wish that they had, at the time, that guys like you that know all of this, the secrets, the trade secrets from when it was in its heyday, before you were ready to retire. I wish when the transition started that they'd have kept more of you around and been like, great, let's train people to do both. Let's train you to do traditional animation and the digital, and then we can have the best of both worlds, and we don't have to give up one for the sake of the other. Why can't we just do both?
My buddy Mike, when I told you that we'd been, both of us had been fired and then we're hired back because Leanne took over the show. So Mike was timing supervisor, which is like animation direction supervisor. And he was looking kind of ill. He was a very close friend of mine, many decades now, very close friend. And I went in, I mean, we were always hanging out together. And I said to him, I said, look, Mike, you're looking a little peaked. Let me call down to the Motion Picture Health and Welfare, right? It's like our clinic. And I'll set up an appointment with Dr. Ando to do a checkup on you. And I'll pay the copay and everything. I'll drive you down, I'll drive you back. And he said, because it was just down on Riverside, and we're pretty close. And he said, Bob, look at all the work on my desk. He said, I can't take time off to do that. I even offered to do what I often did, which was when he got overloaded, I just do the work for him. I just do it. And that way he could just go home, rest. But he wouldn't do that. And Terry McDonald, who was checking the show, was sitting right outside his office, very good friend of mine. She overheard the conversation. And she said afterward, so about 2 weeks later, Mike gave me a call, and it was a thing we used to give each other, pocket knives, you know, there's just a thing. And he had one for me. And he said, I'm going to leave it with Terry. I'm going home. I'm not feeling too good. That was Friday. And then Sunday morning, one of his sons found him dead in the bathroom. He'd just had a heart attack. But Terry would always say that if he had just gone down, done that medical check and forgot about the work on his desk, because I told him, and he knew, I said, you know, Mike, the company doesn't care if you live or die. Mm-hmm. But that's not the way it used to be. It used to be the company cared very much, you know. And I mean, Bill Hanna was very close to my wife, Susan. And I'll just give you an example of the way it used to be, as opposed to the way it is now. Bill and Jane wanted me to go over to Korea to fix some problems at Jerry Smith's studio. It's going to take a few weeks to fix before I could come back. And I said, oh, okay. And so I left and the office, and then I get Ginger on the intercom. Mr. Hanna wants to see you again, Bob. So I went back in, and Jane was standing there kind of smiling, looking sort of, and Bill puts his arm around my shoulder and he says, you're going to miss Susan, aren't you? And I said, well, of course I will. We weren't even married yet, you know, but that everybody knew, you know. He said, you're going to miss Susan, aren't you? And I said, well, yes, sir, Mr. Hanna, but you know, somebody's got to go. May as well be me. He said, I'll tell you what, Bob, here's the thing. You go over there, get set up in your hotel, get set up, getting this work fixed, getting your interpreter and everything. And a week after you land, I'll send Susan over at my own expense.
Aww. Aww.
And he sent her first class. You know, he sent me business class, you know, but he sent her first class. And so it's funny, it's become a metaphor for our lives that when we both went back, you know, we went back together, but for her to sit with me, she had to downgrade. So she had to downgrade to business class to be able to be with me, which is sort of the history of our lives together. And she had a good time in Korea. I mean, we only spent a couple days together the whole time. We went out on a little boat in what's that, the Yellow Sea, the China Sea, maybe. it's that kind of narrow thing there. And there's the island that we spent a lot of time on out there. There was a guy with a fishing boat, had it was like the African Queen, a chug chug thing, and it had eyes painted on the front of the little wooden hole. And we spent a couple days with that fisherman, and Susan got to hold a live shark. He taught her how to put it upside down and rub its belly. So, and the island there that we spent so much time on, kind of a mushroom shaped island, is the big international airport now. They've leveled the island and they put a road out to it from Incheon. And now it's, I don't know what the name, probably Incheon International Airport, I would guess, but that's where it is. So she liked that trip. That was fun. And all Bill Hanna's expense, you know, he didn't want us to be apart. But that's the way it used to be in the business. Everybody was that way. Phil was that way. Chuck Jones was that way. Everybody was that way, but not now. Now it's incredibly cold, and management doesn't even know who you are and doesn't care if you live or die.
Shame.
That's really sad, because that story, I almost started crying. That's how nice that story was. So thank you for sharing that. And that we often, as I say, we often talk on the panels about Hanna-Barbera just in general as a studio and the people that were involved. And obviously no one here other than you has any personal relationship with any of those people. We weren't there. We didn't see any of the things. But I feel like so much of the heart and soul of the people that were responsible for keeping that studio alive is in the cartoons that you guys made.
It is, yeah,
And,
yeah.
you know, it just, we were always saying how we watched things like Scooby-Doo, other things that came from those wonderful studios, and there's no way that all of the wonderful stuff that's in them was just by accident. That is evidence that the people that were doing it were very, very special, and that is 100% missing from what we get today completely.
It is. It's the heart and the soul and the blood that makes, you know, and that's what's missing. It's become a factory, you know. It's become a heartless factory. Mm-hmm. And management doesn't understand, because they're not artists.
Right.
They don't understand that it's not just a formula. It's not just a mechanism, you know, that entertainment is an art, you know, and it's got to do with artists making something that the audience loves so much that they actually pay money to see, you know. But that's, the management doesn't understand that, so they come up with these horrific failures. Mm-hmm. And they're the ones who, you know, sign the paychecks. So if you're going to support your family and put your kids through school and pay the mortgage and all, you have to put up with it. Mm-hmm. But that's not the way it used to be, and it's not the way it should be. But it is the way it is now. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's a dying art form.
Yeah.
Cameron, do you have any questions or anything that you want to say?
I do have two questions, yes, that are on my mind. So the first question, Mr. Nessler, I just want to say I love your stories you've been telling us, and I love how you're telling the old Hanna-Barbera stories. I mean, I know that us four on this panel eat that up because we love the older cartoons, older generations. You know, we have talked about this on previous panels. I see it. You know, when I was growing up as a kid, I always watched Scooby-Doo, the Smurfs, Tom and Jerry. I watched the classic Hanna-Barbera. And I've noticed that now that, you know, I'm 23 years old, and now that cartoons have changed, but I kind of noticed that not so much Scooby-Doo, but even other Hanna-Barbera cartoons, I feel like nowadays they're trying to throw sex, drugs, a lot of all these awful things into cartoons. Yeah. Do you see that as well, or is that just me?
Oh, or? Absolutely. And it's so bizarre. Yeah. I mean, it's like, I mean, I could go on, and I mean, Young Justice is a perfect example. That's, I don't know if you're into superhero stuff, but that's a fan-driven. I think we've done 3 of them.
Right.
And it's a joke. like which superhero is gay this time around, you know?
Right.
And how gay are they, and what kind of gay are they? Or, you know, it's like there's this patronizing thing. Nobody ever cared about that stuff before.
Right.
At all. They didn't care.
Right.
It's like if you have a kid who's gay, which we do, you don't care. It's your kid and you don't care. It's not the subject that comes up.
Right.
You know, the whole thing with superheroes is the interaction, of course, but also the saving the world and fighting the villains and all, you know. And it's become like this patronizing social conscience thing that I think has done a lot of damage.
Agree.
I agree. And we've talked about it on panels before. I just feel like sometimes they try to shove a lot of things down your throat. And and even Wendy and Nikki has said it perfectly before. You know, when you turn on because that's my thing. I find myself watching the older cartoons because it's like there's nothing that's going on in the world right now, you know, social issues, you know, politics. I feel like all that's been wiped away. And I guess that's why I have so much respect for you, sir, and for, you know, Will Hanna and Joseph Barbera, because I felt like they kept all that negativity out of those cartoons. I mean, when you watch Scooby-Doo, you're not worrying about what's going on in the world. You're just worried about, you know, them solving the mystery and, you know, unmasking the villain. You know what I mean?
They did it on purpose. The old guys, and Phil Roman was this way too. They kept things good. They didn't want stuff that was, if you want negative stuff, turn on the 6 o'clock news.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. It's like they understood what cartoons are.
Yes, sir.
They're storytelling. They're fairy tales. I read fairy tales a lot. I love fairy tales. I mean, my adopted daughter, Lisa, whose father never read to her or anything, and she's 31 now, and we've gone through. She loves it when I read to her, and so we've gone through all the Alice in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass and all the. I mean, it's amazing. We've gone through many volumes of Andrew Lang's fairy tales, and I'm reading the Dover reprint of the Andrew Lang's Arabian Nights to her now, you know, with Scheherazade and all that. And I just love fairy tales. I just love fairy tales.
Yes, sir.
And if you look at fairy tales, what they do is they take you out of you realize that fairy tales were at their heyday when Europe was going through the bubonic plague and the 30 Years' War and things like this. People were really suffering. You know, some of the best of the Russian fairy tales were times when, like, you know, Hansel and Gretel is all about somebody abandoning their children in the woods because they can't afford to feed them anymore. And that's so the counterpoint, you know, of the cruelty and the hardness and the grimness of the real world and the fairy tale. You know, the fairy tale was intended to elevate people out of that kind of misery. And that's what we do today. We should be doing that with cartoons.
Sir.
In fact, I think all entertainment should be that, should be to elevate rather than tear down.
I agree.
Yes.
I mean, I've said in the past, and some great entertainment people, like one guy who I think he told me this first was Robert Preston. I was a big fan of Robert Preston. He may be before your time. You may not know who he is, but he was the actor who played the Music Man and Victor Victoria. Bob Preston. He was one of my heroes as a performer. And David Green was doing a movie down at the Wilshire Ebo. And he was a friend of mine. He's a director. Made many, many movies. And he called me and said, Bob Preston has no lines tonight, but he's going to be here. He's just going to sit there, you know, by the craft table. And if you promise to keep your mouth shut and just listen to him, I'll put a chair there for you, right beside him. Spend the whole evening just hearing Bob Preston tell you his life story, and the craft table right there. So we had all the food we wanted, and so I did that. And as the only time I ever had any direct contact with Bob Preston was the night he told me his whole life story, all the way from vaudeville till now. Yeah, told me about Julie Andrews and all the other big celebrities that he had worked with, and I think it was him who said this that one time, and it stuck with me. Like a few things have stuck with me. Something Marcel Marceau told me once, and this thing that Bob Preston said, and that is that entertainers today do what the church used to do. It points the way. It says, this is good, this is bad.
Mhm.
So the church has pretty well discredited itself on all levels, in my opinion, apparently in Preston's too. But the entertainment world should be should take that responsibility seriously, because people emulate what their heroes in movies and TV and things do. And when you're doing children's entertainment, something that, Adolf Hitler said that if you gave him a child of 5 years old, he'd make that child a Nazi for life, because children are so easily impressed. Give Hitler a 5-year-old and he'll make that 5-year-old a Nazi for his whole life.
Yeah.
So, and then Marcel Marceau told me another thing, which is amazing. He said, I asked him, why did he give up traditional stage for mime? I don't know if any of you know. Mime is the guys with the white faces and the stripe, the French, and they do the gestures. They don't talk ever. Okay. So he was at the Schubert Theater out in West LA. And I asked him, why did you give up traditional stage for mime? And he said, because mime is universal. It doesn't depend on a language. And he wrote all his own skits. And he said that he tries to be sure that it appeals to the human common denominator, not something specific to a culture. And so it didn't depend on language. And he said, for art to be great, it has to be universal and appeal to, and that's what cartoons should be. And I think that's one of the big reasons I went into children's entertainment, was because that's what it should be. But
Yes,
it's not that way now.
Yeah.
I agree. My second question for you is, I know that us on here are big Scooby-Doo collectors. I've been collecting since I was a young kid. So my question to you is I know you got some cells, you have some sheets, and I know that's awesome, but what's your favorite Scooby-Doo collectible that you have?
Oh, I don't collect anything, really. What do I have on Scooby-Doo? Well, I don't think I have anything. I know Bill Hanna gave a Scooby to Becky when she was a baby, because he had all these stuffed animals in his closet.
Oh, that's cool.
His office there. But I'm trying to think if I have any Scooby. I think my wife might have something.
Do you have any of the Scooby cells still? Any of the Scooby cells?
Probably.
That's cool.
I have boxes and boxes of art from all the different shows I've worked on, out in the garage.
I love that.
Probably do. I haven't. I haven't. I know one thing Tim Walker wants, because he does collect animation art. And I have, it was, what was his name? It was a class from a famous animator that both Tim and I took the same class, but at different times. What was his name? I can't remember. But anyhow, he gave me, there's a Dr. Seuss TV special called Horton Hears a Who. You ever seen?
Yes, sir.
So he gave me the whole scene, the original drawings of the scene where Horton lifts a puffball up to his eye and looks at it real close, you know? So I have all that original scene, and Tim wants it desperately. But my garage is such a mess, and everything is just piled in there. And then we had an earthquake not long ago, and stuff fell over, which makes it a little harder to find stuff. So it's a mess. I mean, we've been in this house for 26 years, and things accumulate. Oh, somebody was calling me. Just a moment. I don't want to. Oh, it's Raleigh. Okay. I am going to decline that and then call him back and apologize. Raleigh is an old Marine who was a prisoner of war in Hanoi and escaped. 5 guys did the escape. 3 of them survived the escape. And then 2 of them committed suicide afterwards. So he's the only survivor of it. It's very famous too. It's not just him told me about it, but he's sort of a famous Vietnam hero. And war does terrible things to people. Anyhow, he's a very good friend. I'll have to call him back. He'll be pissed at me for. That's Raleigh. Just a second. Hang on. Hang on. Hey, Raleigh. Hang on. I'm going to put you on speaker. So I'm being interviewed by a Scooby-Doo fan group right now. On the so I'm bragging about you, buddy. How you escaped the prison in Hanoi.
Oh, nothing brag about, buddy.
They call that the Hanoi Hilton or something. So, can I call you back?
Yeah, call me back. I'll talk to you tomorrow. I just wish David a happy birthday too.
Okay, that's wonderful. Could I? How late are you going to be up tonight?
I don't know. When I fall asleep, I'll fall asleep.
All right. Okay. I'll talk to you later, pal. Okay. Bye-bye. Raleigh's great. He's great. You know, you say, you know, they don't make him like him anymore. You should hear some of his combat stories. This guy's amazing. And it's all part of the record. It's all true, you know? Yeah. So, but so anyhow, sorry for that interruption. Where were we?
So Will, do you have any other questions or anything that you want to say?
Yeah, I'll ask one more question, but first I just want to let you know this has been really great listening to you. I feel really fortunate that we had the opportunity to hear all this stuff and all the topics you're discussing and how you're connecting these amazing like moments in history are it's fascinating. It's wonderful. So here's a question. This is a lot lighter than the things we've just been talking about, though. So you had mentioned that you worked on that Batman series where Harley Quinn was essentially developed.
Yeah. I was working with Eric Radomski, and Eric became one of our executive producers on Guardians of the Galaxy, as a matter of fact.
Are there other things that you contributed to or that you worked on that became part of popular culture, and every once in a while you still see it and you're like, oh my God, I was there for that. Like I was there, or I actually worked on something that has lasted 20 or 30 years and is now in movies and things like that.
God, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Maybe
we might know better than you. Yeah. So
yeah, I think you might know better than I do. Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't. I'm in my retirement. I'm slowly, as I'm getting my health back, I'm starting to work on a couple books that are really something I want to do. One of them is fairies. It's called Fairyland. It's about fairies. And the other one is called Microbes, which is about germs who live in a petri dish and don't know they're germs, and they don't know they live in a petri dish. Kind of a metaphor for the human race, you know. So that's kind of what I'm thinking of doing right now. I mean, I haven't taken any advances from the publisher because I don't want to have to work under the restraint of a deadline. But it'll get, both of them will get published for sure.
Will those be illustrated children's books, or are those more novel?
They'll be illustrated. They'll be very heavily illustrated, and they're but children's books. Yeah. I love fairy tales. And so I have a lot of friends who've done books on like the history of the animation business and stuff like that. I have no interest in doing that. That seems so boring to me. So I only want to do a book that I would read myself. Well, it's been a lot of fun. I didn't know that it would go so comfortably.
Oh, we're glad that we made you feel comfortable. So, and we really, really appreciate your time and answering questions and telling us your stories. It's fascinating. Like, you've lived an amazing life, and we're very lucky that you were willing to share that with us. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
It was an honor. Thank you.
If you ever get me started telling my stories about the old Soviet Union, and my getting arrested by those are all true stories too. And China, I spent a lot of time over in China, and I used to live in Colombia down South America. I did a lot of work and travel. It's in 3 civil wars down there. So I've seen a lot of the world, and I think that's why working in children's entertainment is so important. It's when you see how bad things can be for people, you want to try to make things better somehow.
Well, you've definitely succeeded in making things better through your animation.
Yes. So. Yeah, for sure.
I would hope so.
I do have one final question for you. Do you have a favorite Scooby-Doo movie or series, or just a favorite character in general that you've worked on?
Yeah, I have a favorite character that I never worked on, and that's SpongeBob. I love SpongeBob and Patrick. And Steve Hildebrandt, I knew when I was working at Nickelodeon. My buddy Larry Huber was Steve's mentor, who'd gotten him in business, got him started. So it was not at all unusual that we would spend time and have lunch. But I just never ended up working on SpongeBob. But I love SpongeBob. It's I always get a big laugh. And that first SpongeBob movie is funny, so funny. I like that. I don't think I ever worked on Beavis and Butthead either, but the Beavis and Butthead movie is very famous. What's his name? Mike something or other, the Beavis and Butthead guy. We did one season at Film Roman, and I met the guy who created it, and we were talking about the movies he'd made. He made a movie called Office Space.
Oh yeah.
Made another movie, which I said, well, no, my favorite's Idiocracy. This guy goes into the future, and it's like it's run by idiots, and I guess everybody else's favorite that he'd made was what's that guy's Mike
Judge.
Mike Judge, it is. Yeah. Mike Judge. He's a nice guy. He was at the wrap party we had for Beavis and Butthead, and also for the Ultimate Spider-Man, which I was doing. Did anybody here ever see the Ultimate Spider-Man? 4 seasons. Did 4 seasons.
Mm-hmm. I have.
It was CGI backgrounds, so he could swing around. Yeah, that was so much fun. We had my buddy Don was the head of He's a Scotsman, of all things. He was the head of CGI on that. And we just got started, and I had a sequence where Venom and Spider-Man, that I had to direct, where Venom and Spider-Man were supposed to be squaring off for a fight. It was like in the early part of season 1 somewhere. And but it was the first thing we were doing. And the board was good, but a good friend of mine did the storyboard, but it was cut into a bunch of different scenes to do the coverage, right? To establish the size difference and the build suspense and all. And so I went in and I asked Don, I said, since this is CGI, Don, and he was like modeling all of Manhattan and stuff, it was amazing. And I said, what if I want the camera to orbit the characters, to build, to show the size, to all the stuff that the separate cuts show? And he said, yeah, we can do that. So we did that. And then everybody else saw that. And they actually, when they were promoting the thing, they used that orbiting camera thing to sell the show, And then for thereafter, we did that kind of stuff. We would combine shots with camera moves because we could. So every hot set, like the high school or the home or sets that were going to be reused a lot, they would model them completely 3D so that we could move the camera around any way we wanted. But just a story. I don't know if you're interested in that stuff or not. But.
Absolutely.
We're interested in any stories you have.
Yeah. Nice thing is that we're friends. We're actually, he and I and his wife, I've known his wife much longer than I've known him. And they're still to this day very good friends, and we're all Facebook friends and get together seldom, but every now and then. That's long-lasting friends. My best friend, Ron Myrick, and I have been friends for 40 years. Best friends for 40 years. He's a guy you'd like to interview. He's been around forever. Yeah, he's an animation director, producer.
Bob, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. And before we wrap this up, I'm going to have everybody just let us know where we can find you on social media. So Bob, let's start with you.
Oh, yeah, I'm on Facebook and Instagram. Facebook is just my name, and I'm on Instagram, Bob Nesler 4, I think it is. Bob Nesler 4, like the numeral 4.
Will, what about you? Where can we find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter at Davenport Will Draw.
Oh.
Thank you.
Wendy?
You can come say hi to me on Instagram. I'm at Wendy Bridge, or on Twitter, I'm at Wendy Loves Jesus, and my blog is wendylovesjesus.wordpress.com.
Oh, I'm sorry for all the religious slams.
No, I actually agree with you. To me, Jesus and organized religion are not the same thing. So no worries on that.
I studied theology for 3 years. Before I became a cartoonist, I studied theology for 3 years. And yeah, I mean, see, I even still have my old Bible.
Nice.
All beat up.
Nice.
But here's the thing. I had to quit because I call it industrial religion. It's like it was just this big hypocritical factory. And I found that all these big evangelists that were supposedly teaching us how, they were teaching us how to skin people. They were teaching us how to make so much money that we could have big mansions and a fleet of automobiles. And that's what it's all about. It's all about big bucks. And they just use the theology as a mechanism for enriching themselves. Yeah. And I thought that was horrible. It's just horrible. So I was sort of driven to becoming a cartoonist, I guess, just by desperation, because there's no way on earth I could earn a living that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't blame you one bit. Not one bit.
Yep.
Cameron,
So
where can we find you on social media?
You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube at Scooby-Doo and Cameron Too. I'm just using the @ Scooby and Cam. So like I said, stop by and say hello. I love talking to everybody.
And I'm Nikki Blake from ScoobyAddicts.com. Thank you for joining us for another Scooby panel. Thank you for tuning in to another Scooby panel. I'm Nikki Blake from ScoobyAddicts.com. If you like these panels, please subscribe to my channel for more great discussions. A very special thank you to animator Bob Nesler, artist Will Davenport, artist, blogger, and Scooby collector Wendy BRYDGE, and Cameron Bates from Scooby-Doo and Cameron Too. Scooby and Shaggy were voiced by Scott Innes. Check out Scott's website, onescottshop.com. Scooby Panel is available in podcast form on most podcast platforms, or as a web series on YouTube. If you would like to support the Scooby Panel, please go to support.ScoobyAddicts.com. Scooby Addicts art by Will Davenport, video editing by Nikki Blake, music composed and performed by Bovine Nightmares. Please join us next time for our discussion on the food of the Scooby-Doo show.
Oh, I would love that. I just want to ask, would it be possible, Nikki, to like copy me an email with everybody's addresses like that so that I could?
Absolutely. Yep, I will definitely send everybody's info to you.
Thank you.
We would all be thrilled to chat with you. I know I can speak for everybody here. We would love that.
Agreed.
It's been really fun for me. I mean, my wife won't let me sit and talk and tell stories like this. She gets bored real quick.
That's funny.
But she's had to put up with me for a long time too. But you know, she's known all these people that I have, you know, when we'd have people over for, I remember when Phil and Anita passed away. Phil's still around. He remarried too. Very nice lady he married. And but Phil and Anita would come by for dinner to our house sometimes. And he always said the same thing. He'd say, you know, you're the only person who's worked for me, the only employee who's invited us home to their home for dinner. I said, really? That's crazy, you know? And it's like a family, you know, everybody's so close. Back in the old days, it's very different now. But I haven't seen Phil for a while. He's quite a bit older now. You know, we all are, I guess. But last time I saw him, no, it was before, it was the next to last time I saw him was when we were finishing, because we saw him since Larry Huber and Sylvia and I did, but we, I didn't expect to see him. It was at the film Roman, which was initially a play on his name, Phil Roman. And we had finished The Ultimate Spider-Man, and we were doing it was like a pilot for another show. I can't remember exactly what it was. And then I was going over to Warner's from there. And Phil was in the process of getting ready to sell the company. So he had a bunch of people in suits he was showing around the building, okay? And I saw him and he saw me, and immediately we just ran up and hugged each other, big hugs. And then he said, God, are you still working here? And I said, well, we just finished up. We're just wrapping up. I'm going over to Warner's from here. He said, it's so good to see you, you know? And then I didn't even know he had an office there. So he took me down to his office. He totally ignored the suits who he was showing around. He totally forgot about them and left them milling around, you know? And he took me to his office and got, and pulled up his, called his wife on the computer so I could meet her over the computer, his new wife, Laura. And it's just, you know, it's just like instantaneously, like back to the way it was, you know. So, because you have close relationships like that, but the new industry just isn't like that. It's just not like that anymore, and it's a terrible thing to lose, you know. And it's not just me. It's like anybody who was there would say the same thing. You know, it's I retired at the right time, I think.
Yeah.